Okay. Honorable colleagues from around the world, representatives from the social media companies, representatives of all our Jewish organizations, and all other dear guests. A real good morning to you, and thank you all for being here. It is an honor to address you all today as we gather here to discuss one of the most pressing issues of our time, online anti-Semitism. In this digital age, where information flows freely and connections transcend borders, we find ourselves confronted with a stark reality: the rise of hate speech and discrimination targeting the Jewish community within the online sphere. Online anti-Semitism poses a grave threat to our societies, our shared values, and the principles of equality and respect that underpin our democratic systems. It perpetuates harmful stereotypes, fuels division, and fosters an environment of fear and hostility. And this growing menace not only undermines the fabric of our societies, but also compromises the safety and well-being of countless individuals who fall victim to this form of hatred. Anti-Semitism is also often viewed as the canary in the mine, as the warning sign of rising hate everywhere, and the warning we see today needs to be taken more serious than today. So today we stand at a critical juncture where the power to combat online anti-Semitism lies in the hands of the social media companies, the gatekeepers of the digital realm. As we engage in this crucial conversation, it is imperative that we recognize the significant role these companies play in shaping the online landscape and the responsibility they bear in creating a safer and more inclusive virtual environment. Because while the digital revolution has brought us countless opportunities and advancements, it has also provided a platform for hate speech to thrive. We must acknowledge that the current measures taken by your companies to combat online hate have not been sufficient. And the inadequacy of the existing systems to swiftly and effectively remove anti-Semitic content necessitates immediate action and stronger regulation. So it is time for us to demand accountability from these companies, and we call upon them to be more proactive in monitoring and detecting hate speech, employing sophisticated algorithms and AI-driven tools to swiftly identify and remove anti-Semitic content. Transparency should be a guiding principle, ensuring that users are aware of the policies in place and the actions taken against those who spread hate. Furthermore, it is paramount that these companies allocate substantial resources to train their content moderators and equip them with the necessary expertise to identify and address online anti-Semitism. Collaboration with external organizations, including Jewish advocacy groups, experts, should be actively pursued to develop effective strategies to counter this pervasive form of hate. And while technological solutions are indispensable, we must not overlook the importance of education and awareness. Social media companies should invest in initiatives that foster digital literacy, promote tolerance, and empower individuals to stand against online anti-Semitism. And by promoting a culture of respect, we can work together to cultivate a digital ecosystem that rejects hate in all its forms. However, the burden of fighting online anti-Semitism should not rest solely on the shoulders of the big social media companies. Governments, civil society organizations, and individuals must join forces to create a comprehensive and multifaceted approach. We must work hand in hand to develop legislation that holds perpetrators accountable, ensures swift and just consequences for those who engage in hate speech, and establishes clear guidelines for the big tech companies to follow. In conclusion, the battle against online anti-Semitism demands our utmost attention and dedication, and we must urge the social media companies to recognize their pivotal role and strengthen their commitment to removing online hate. We must push for stronger regulation to ensure accountability, transparency, and swift actions. By combining technological advancements, education, and our collaborative efforts, we can make substantial progress in dismantling the walls of hatred and fostering a digital landscape where all people are treated with dignity and respect. So thank you all for coming. We will start by some opening remarks by the founding members of this task force against online anti-Semitism. So with that, I give the floor to Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman-Schultz, please.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Lega. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to once again convene our Interparliamentary Task Force to combat online anti-Semitism, and I want to thank our colleagues for joining us from around the world, and to Mr. Lega for hosting us today at the European Parliament, and also to Frederica Ries for helping make the meeting in this room possible. We have major challenges that we're facing. I want to acknowledge Michal Kotler-Wunsch, as well as Anthony Housefather, who joined me in co-founding this task force. We have worked diligently over the last year, last 2 years, 3 years almost, to make sure that we could focus a white-hot spotlight on this critical issue. During our time in Brussels, we've heard from experts from the digital sector, civil society leaders, and envoys from around the world to assess progress in our mission to halt the spread of anti-Semitism online. I'm grateful to have this opportunity to expand on our previous summit in Washington, D.C. last September. This was a crucial step in highlighting the extent of anti-Semitism on social platforms. We brought in experts to analyze the role of algorithms that disproportionately serve hateful content to social media users and to investigate the impact of online radicalization on real-life violence. We raised difficult questions about whether current content moderation practices are adequate and had frank conversations, as we will today, about whether social media companies are rising to their broader societal obligations as the town square of the 21st century. Although many of these questions were left unanswered, we're encouraged by the willingness of YouTube, Meta, and Twitter representatives to continue to engage with global lawmakers and Jewish advocacy organizations, even as we share our disappointment with the lack of transparency and concrete action. We acknowledge that the companies are not required to testify, but are voluntarily participating, and we thank you for that. And we are not here to cast blame. We have run out of time for that. We are past the point of casting aspersions, accusing one another of chilling free expression, divulging trade secrets, or hiding behind platitudes and equivocation. The scale of this crisis, the acceleration in the spread of hatred, demands more from us. Our neighbors are afraid to display that they are Jewish online or in real life. I've heard from college students who won't wear a yarmulke to class and homeowners who take down their mezuzahs so their door won't be marked with a swastika, which happened just last week in my own congressional district. All of this starts online. One tragic example from the United States is in 2018, a gunman entered a synagogue in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, killing 11 worshipers. During his trial, prosecutors entered into evidence social media posts the gunman made before his attack, where he called Jews the, quote, children of Satan and public enemy number one. He posted, liked, and shared a stream of anti-Semitic content, including an image that stated, quote, the only good Jew is a dead Jew. He engaged with anti-Semites online, and his anti-Semitic words turned deadly. These extremists, terror sympathizers, and neo-Nazis that were once confined to the deepest reaches of the dark web are now trending on your front pages, whose reach doesn't abide by borders. But now anti-Semitic conspiracy theories and Holocaust denial are jumping at light speed from screen to screen, infecting our public discourse and reinforcing damaging stereotypes. We've heard story after tragic story about parents who only discovered that their teenager has been sucked into the alt-right pipeline after irreparable damage has been done. As a parent, I'm heartbroken by the fact that some family members, not mine, thankfully, have no idea that their child has been radicalized until it is too late. And as a mother of 3 Jewish children, I fear that the next generation of anti-Semites are being bred online, and my own daughter has had direct personal experience on Twitter by being attacked and having her body altered with swastikas, the yellow stars of David, and cartoon cans of Zyklon attached to her body parts on Twitter. That is why we are here. It is time to take serious, concrete steps to end the proliferation of anti-Semitism on social platforms. That's why we've asked each of the social media companies represented here today to increase transparency and shared data, employee guidance, and content moderation policies with hate prevention experts to accommodate a thorough audit. This will ensure that each company's policies are in line with best practices for countering the spread of anti-Semitism in its many modern manifestations, including in the guise of anti-Semitism. We can't fight anti-Semitism without defining it. I've continued to advocate for social media platforms to adopt the International Holocaust Remembrance Association's working definition, as we all have here, as a framework for identifying anti-Semitic content. One of the key drivers in the resurgence of online anti-Semitism has been highly visible incidents of anti-Semitism from influential figures that too often go unpunished by the platforms. It's important to make clear that your policies will be even-handedly applied and precisely applied, no matter who violates them. Bigotry is bigotry, no matter who promotes it. It's just as crucial to actively provide resources for education to counter bias and prejudice, While we're grateful that some of your platforms attempt to connect users with accurate information regarding the Holocaust, anti-Semitic canards and stereotypes in all forms must be recognized, labeled, and corrected so hateful beliefs can be corrected instead of reinforced. But we must go further. I hope today's hearing will shed light on unanswered questions and serve as an opportunity for the companies to recommit themselves to the collective effort of ensuring their platforms used by billions of people every day cannot be corrupted to spread anti-Semitism and hate. And I look forward to the discussion today, and I yield back, Mr. Lega.
Thank you so much. And with that, I give the floor to Member of Parliament Anthony Housefather from Canada.
Thank you so much, David, for hosting us today. Thank you to Debbie and Michal and all of the parliamentarians here. You couldn't be better partners in this endeavor. And to all of the people who worked with us over the last 3 years, all of the special envoys and ambassadors that have been fighting anti-Semitism, all of the community organizations, all of civil society organizations who have been here this week. And again, we appreciate the work of AJC and the European Jewish Congress and the Conference of Presidents who have hosted different events for us, and all of the technology experts that have worked with us. We are a force that is not going away. This is a continuum from last year's hearings at Congress. And as opposed to writing remarks, what I wanted to do was reflect what I've heard over the last couple of days from all of the experts that we've brought together. I want to also thank the platforms because we don't have subpoena power. We're not a national body. We have you here because you've agreed to be here, and the goal is to cooperate with you. That has always been the case. But things are scary for us. Last Friday night, my uncle passed away, and he lived in the suburbs of Atlanta. My mom's sister's husband, very close relative. That was Friday night. On Saturday morning, less than 50 miles from where my uncle passed away, less than 40 miles from where his funeral was on Sunday morning, there were people marching with swastikas outside a synagogue. This is in America. In Canada and the United States, we have not had this. We have 350 years of American Jewish history where we've never had people that have felt this frightened. We've had anti-Semitism, but we haven't had physical attacks like we had in the synagogue in Pittsburgh, in California and Poway, or in the hostage taking in Colleyville, Texas. And why is this happening to us now? We're countries where Canada, the US, and the UK, we've had very little anti-Semitism when you ask the research questions about whether our people are inherently anti-Semitic. It's only about 7 or 8% of the population. But anti-Semitism is drifting into our midst. And 60 to 80% of people, when you poll them, say they've experienced anti-Semitism. Where is this happening? It's online. For the very first time, people from other countries, especially bad countries like Russia and North Korea, and China, are able to influence what's Iran, what's happening in our countries by what's happening on the platforms. People who are the fringe on the far right and the far left, and it's equally bad on both sides, are using social media to make their message more widespread because the algorithms are driving hate to hate, and people who are looking for it can find hate on the platforms, and it's not coming down in the way that we want it to come down. And that's very, very scary. Anti-Semitism, as we've heard from experts, is very different because you have one group on the far left that associates Jews with being white supremacists who are promoting apartheid and have the anti-Zionist tropes that single out Israel for condemnation. On the far right, you have the other anti-Semitic tropes that Jews are people who are bringing immigrants and people who are different into societies and taking away the white majority. And we get hit from everywhere. So we really need your help and your collaboration to tackle this problem. And the problem is, what our groups have told us is that when it comes to Twitter, you're removing policies that have protected us. The trusted reporting program seems to be disappearing. Other Twitter policies that have protected us are going away. When it comes to Meta or YouTube, the policies aren't going away, but the implementation isn't happening the way the policies promise, particularly at Meta, where a lot of people have just been let go. So people are really, really concerned. And we hear from groups that I know that when I read your transparency reports, it says that all of these posts are coming down. But our groups are telling us when they're blood libel posts, when they're Holocaust posts that are denying the Holocaust, despite your policies, only 4 to 11% of the posts are actually coming down, and it's actually declining. So we have a real issue here. And we understand that one of the challenges is, and obviously private businesses want to monetize their platforms. But if you would invest the significant resources that I know that you have in terms of tackling the anti-Semitism in the way that you do child pornography or terrorism posts, there would be a much better ability, I think, to get these posts down. So we want to ask you to work with us. We had asked last year at our hearings for an audit, an independent audit. And today I'm going to be asking you whether you will agree to cooperate with us and do that independent audit with our experts and allow us to really see what is happening. And when the EU, where we are right now, has passed the DSA, will you be implementing the DSA across the world, or will somehow it be relegated only to the EU, leaving all of us with the non-responsive, non-transparent way that we seem to think that things are going right now? So thank you for being here, and I look forward to questioning you.
Thank you so much, Anthony. And with that, I will give the floor to former member of Knesset, Michal Kotlewunsch.
Thank you. Thank you to all of my colleagues that are here. Thank you for enabling this very important continued discussion, MEP David Lega. And thank you to all the incredible partners that we've had along the way. Thank you to the three of you for being here. As my colleagues have mentioned, we understand that you don't have to be here, and we do want to engage in conversations. For us, and I want to make it clear as this advances, you represent your companies. So this is not personal, and it's not the individuals who are here. You represent companies, and we understand that they have given you the sort of authority to be here and represent them and speak for them. So thank you for being here again. Lived experiences of Jews across the globe, corroborated by alarming statistics, indicate that there has been dramatic increase in anti-Semitic incidents, some of which we've heard about. Research conducted and presented to us by technology experts, some of them here with us today, shows that there is a predictive relationship between anti-Semitic tropes, memes, and rhetoric, combined with online conspiracy theories, and the uptick in the real-world attacks, harm, and violence. There is an undeniable relationship between the hate spewed online and the real-world harm and violence that spills onto campuses and into the streets. Online hate is fueled by and fuels dangerous propaganda that transcends the geographic borders of any country. Combating this social contagion, spreading hatred globally, requires global collaboration. Alongside the growing challenge, online anti-Semitism presents an opportunity and responsibility for digital platforms, policymakers, special envoys, technology experts, and civil society stakeholders to work together to recognize, track, and examine the rising threat to the foundations of democracies, and to create comprehensive recommendations, strategies, legislation, and mechanisms that can inform and be utilized in the broader context of combating anti-Semitism and in addressing other forms of online hate, conspiracy, and disinformation. Many global initiatives have been launched to combat virulent rising anti-Semitism. One such initiative is sitting in front of you now. It grew from parliamentary hearings held in Israel's 23rd Knesset in 2020, in which social media giants, civil society organizations, and technology experts convened to better understand the alarming rise in viral online anti-Semitism that coincided with COVID-19. Subsequently, the Interparliamentary Task Force to combat online anti-Semitism was launched in 2020, together with multi-partisan partners from the United States, from Canada, from the UK, and Australia, who are here in front of you today. The task force has since grown to include additional members from all over the world, including our host today, MEP David Lega, continuing the discussion in numerous geographies, committed to serving as a consistent, continued voice that is not going away, committed to protecting all from online hate, critically transcending real and perceived differences of geography, of politics, of religion, of language, and much more. The task force works to establish consistent messages and policy from parliaments and legislatures around the world to hold social media platforms, including all of those represented here today and some who are not, accountable, to advocate for the adoption and publication of transparent policies related to hate speech, and to ensure their transparent and consistent application and implementation, to raise awareness about anti-Semitism on social media platforms and its real-world consequences in order to acknowledge the tremendous responsibility that comes with the incredible power that social media platforms hold, and to emphasize that if one minority cannot be protected by hate speech policies and their detailed protected characteristics, ultimately, none can. It is especially meaningful to be sitting here in the European Parliament to talk about the scourge of anti-Semitism that resulted in unspeakable atrocities too terrible to imagine, but not too terrible to have happened in the places in which we sit and represent. The task force's 2021 interim report included several key recommendations, of which we've had no engagement and follow-up with your platforms. Repeated in the 2022 September hearings in the US Congress, once again, of which we've had little, if any, response from the platforms which you represent. These included the acknowledgement that in order to effectively and comprehensively identify and combat online anti-Semitism, it is critical to first define it. Further, we've repeatedly underscored the imperative for social media platforms to enhance transparency regarding algorithms, policies, and their implementation, including how content is removed, what content is removed, and what tools are used to direct users to certain sites or redirect users away from hate and or harms, and provide regular quarterly reports on these issues. This is critical if platforms are to indeed be a marketplace of ideas, not of eyeballs, in which individuals are directed to content that reinforces existing opinions. The clear conclusion is that legislators too must take responsibility, and that's what we are doing, demanding or creating independent oversight mechanisms to efficiently and transparently monitor the online space. As the international consensus definition established after nearly 20 years of democratic process and adopted by 41 countries, all of them represented here, and over 1,100 entities, the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, IHRA, working definition is the benchmark definition of anti-Semitism for social media giants too to turn to. This comprehensive working definition critically enables, as Canada's former Justice Minister and current anti-Semitism envoy, Professor Erwin Kotler, explained, track the mutation from its traditional form, barring the individual Jew from an equal place in society, to the mainstreamed modern form, barring the Jewish nation state from an equal place among the nations. The late Elie Wiesel underscored that the Holocaust did not begin in the gas chambers. It began with words. The hate being spewed online today against the Jewish people and their sovereign state must be of significant concern to you, not only to us. The platforms have taken some steps forward since the founding of the task force in 2020, developing new tools that can support our efforts to combat online anti-Semitism and hatred. For instance, Facebook committed to flag Holocaust denial and refer users to the WJC website with educational resources on the Holocaust. Is that happening? Twitter enabled users to add context to misleading tweets, creating an educational moment without limiting free speech. So it's possible. Knowing that this is possible, these same tools should and must be utilized and expanded to include flagging anti-Semitic posts and or tweets, referring out to the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism. Like Twitter's added context, a label at the bottom of the tweet can be added to say, warning, this is a violation of the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism. Learn more at. In this way, speech is not limited or curbed. Rather, something is being done to address the online anti-Semitism in our midst. The continued task force discussions held in the US Congress and now here in the EU Parliament recognize that we have a shared responsibility to work together, learning from one another in order to identify and combat the mutating hate in our midst, and to put a stop to the downward spiral of this anti-Semitic vitriol. The imperative to raise the public's awareness to the dissemination of hateful digital information and to the fact that we are not consumers in the current digital platform business model, but rather the product, assumes and reclaims compromised free will and agency at a time of supposed ultimate freedom and agency. The Digital Safety Act, the DSA, recently passed in the European Parliament, paves the path globally for the transparency critical for all of our societies and for social media platforms to be held to account. These hearings are not about blame. They are a call to action. They are not personal. They are not political. They are a call to action not only for each of the platforms, but to legislators, to you as well, to experts, to special envoys, to civil society, and to the general public, to engage and hone the ability and responsibility of our generation, namely to ensure that as humanity continues to evolve and develop, we devise the necessary tools to address the fundamental changes in the way we consume information, while ensuring that the spread of virulent hate and conspiracy theories, of which anti-Semitism is but a predictive example, does not collapse the entire shared infrastructure, taking us back into the darkest times in history. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Michal. Before we get started with your opening interventions, I'd just like to mention to everyone that during this summit, we had many interesting and rewarding conversations with the Jewish community, with civil society organizations, NGOs, and also with Commissioner Shinas and our special envoy here within the European Commission, Katharina Wurden-Schnurbein, the coordinator on combating anti-Semitism. And during this process, the task force has been really working together with the special envoys from all over the world. In the US, we had both Deborah Lipstadt and Noah Tishby there. Today, we are happy to have with us also Felix Klein, the special envoy from Germany, who will address us from online, on screen, for a 5-minute intervention. This relationship is extremely important to us and to the whole mission of combating online anti-Semitism. So thank you so much, Felix, for being here, and you will have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the invitation. Ladies and gentlemen, yesterday I spoke at a press conference in Berlin on the release of the Federal Association of Departments for Research and Information on Anti-Semitism's annual report on anti-Semitic incidents in Germany in 2022. I consider the association, also known as Bundesverband RIAS, to be one of the most important of all the projects I have initiated as Federal Commissioner. Why is that? RIAS provides invaluable data on the pervasiveness of anti-Semitism in Germany, including on Jew hatred online. Their work enables us to have an idea of the scope of the problem we are facing. In yesterday's report, they state that 1/3 of all anti-Semitic incidents reported to them in 2022 happened in the internet and on social media. I was also very moved about Debbie Wassermann-Schulz and Anthony Hausvater's examples on online anti-Semitism. This is reality, ladies and gentlemen. And I can only confirm also that the majority of these cases take place on social media platforms such as Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. RIAS only includes cases in their report which are being reported to them, meaning that RIAS does not proactively search the internet for instances of anti-Semitism. In turn, this indicates that the 843 incidents reported in 2022 represent only a fraction of the overall prevalence of anti-Semitism online. According to the report, most anti-Semitic comments are posted in connection with any random Jewish topic, or even topics that are merely perceived to be Jewish. An example of this could be Jewish holidays, for instance. But this means that Jewish internet users cannot evade being confronted with hatred against who they are. They go online to do whatever they were planning on doing there, minding their own business, and all of a sudden have to face anti-Semitism. Some of these users have stated that they have chosen to leave social media platforms because they do not feel safe there anymore. For years now, the internet is as much part of our reality as is going to work, walking down the street, or shopping for groceries. And just as in all of these cases, we must not allow anti-Semites to threaten and insult Jews online, who would then withdraw from what has become an integral part of our social, economic, and political life. So, of course, it is, I think, common sense that the online space cannot be an area of lawlessness. And it has also already been mentioned, I think that the Digital Services Act will be an important tool to that end, namely to combat anti-Semitism online. I'm very hopeful that the so-called very large online platforms have to implement DSA standards by August 25 this year, smaller providers by February 17th next year. And I really hope that this will help to better act against anti-Semitism online, including prosecution when it is warranted. I mentioned before that a third of anti-Semitic incidents reported to RIAS in Germany in 2022 occurred online. This makes the internet the space most likely for Jews to encounter hatred directed them for being Jewish. Online anti-Semitism is not just one of many problems in combating Jew hatred today. It is an area that we, decision makers, large corporations, civil societies, members of parliament, have to specifically target in order to protect Jews through bringing anti-Semites to justice. And I think this event we are having now is really contributing to that end. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Felix, for being here with us today. And I look forward to hearing your thoughts also after this hearing. I just want to give a special thank you to my dear friend Federica Rees for organizing the room so we had a chance to do this summit here today. Thank you so much also for being here today.
Just 2 seconds, because I know that time is very limited today. It's a pleasure to welcome all of you here to the European Parliament. We have been discussing and debating this most important issue for years and years now. It has completely changed of nature with the existence now of the social media and certainly the invention, quote, quote, of the algorithm. We all know where, the good and the bad are in this situation. I just wanted to know, we as parliamentarians have to run from room. Well, I mean, I'm not explaining history to you, but have to run. This is our life. And for the time being, the European Parliament is being fractured by an important discussion on the restoration of the nature, which is dividing, fracturing groups within the groups. We have the plenary in 2 weeks and explaining why we have even more than usual to run and decide on attitudes between the group. I will have to run because at the same time, this morning, we are, since yesterday, welcoming members of the Knesset. I've been a parliamentarian here for, I'm afraid to say, 24 years. That makes me very ancient here, but it does. And for as long as that, I've been a member of the delegation for the relations with Israel. We always have missions in Jerusalem or our colleagues from the Knesset coming to see and to discuss with us. They're here for the moment. This is the reason why David and all of you, please excuse me if I have to run quite soon. We know all the actions that we have been taking together. For years and years, we have been reporting problematic and anti-Semitic content to the platforms. The results of this reporting and what has been done by the platforms is appalling. It's not getting better. That's a euphemism. I will be informed by the inquiry and the scrutiny that you all are going to subject the platform to, but we know we have to work together. My hope year after is because we're usual suspect in the debate, and it's a pleasure to belong to this squad of usual suspects. But we don't need to be convinced. We have to convince the others. So I hope that next year we will be able to have a full room of members, of colleagues, and of people who we haven't met before, if you understand me, that we will have to convince of the very vital importance of this fight that we share, and the fight that we deplore is a historic fight. One of the ladies here, the colleague ladies, mentioned it's as ancient as human nature. I mean, fighting against racism and anti-Semitism. And I do hope that one day, us together, the usual suspects and all the others will, provoke a change in this. This is my hope for what we're doing together. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Federica. And with that, we'll move into the opening remarks from our guests today. And I will also try to be strict on time, so please forgive me in advance for interrupting you if you exceed your time, because we need to make sure that we do have time for the important dialogues as well. So 5 minutes each. David Wielden, the Senior Director, EMEA for Government Affairs and Public Policy from YouTube. Please, you have the floor for 5 minutes, sir.
Thank you, David. Thank you, distinguished members of the Interparliamentary Task Force, and thank you for this opportunity to appear before you today. I'm the Senior Director on YouTube's public policy team that advises the company on matters related to online user-generated content. YouTube's mission is to give everyone a voice and show them the world. Openness has always been one of YouTube's guiding principles, and freedom of expression is a big part of what makes YouTube special. But freedom of expression does not mean anything goes. We've always had rules of the road about what is allowable on YouTube and what is not, including our long-standing policies against anti-Semitic content and other forms of hate speech. In recent years, as you have all acknowledged, the global community has witnessed a dramatic rise in anti-Semitic incidents. At YouTube, we have a proven record of partnerships with third-party experts to inform our policies. We have a long history of providing financial support to organizations working to combat anti-Semitism around the world. And our pledge to this task force, to our users and to the wider online community is that we will continue to fight anti-Semitism and hate speech online through our policies, tools and programs. Responsibility is our #1 priority at YouTube and is central to every product and policy decision we make. There is no place on YouTube for hateful content. Not only is this type of content harmful to our community, but the overwhelming majority of creators, viewers and advertisers do not want to be associated with it, meaning it is also bad for our business. Our multi-layered approach to responsibility includes removing content that violates our policies, raising authoritative and reliable content, and rewarding our trusted creators. Our community guidelines strictly prohibit hate speech on YouTube. We remove content promoting violence or hatred against protected individuals or groups, including the Jewish community, as well as conspiracy theories alleging that these individuals or groups are evil, corrupt, or malicious. This policy also prohibits the use of racial, religious, or other slurs and stereotypes, and content alleging that a group is superior in order to justify discrimination, segregation, or exclusion based on a variety of protected qualities. This would include, for example, videos that promote or glorify Nazi ideology. We do not allow content that denies the existence of well-documented violent historical events. For example, we remove content denying that the Holocaust took place. In cases where content isn't covered by our hate speech policy, it may fall under other policies against harassment and violence. While content that praises or glorifies terrorists, criminal figures and organizations is covered by our policies against violent, criminal and terrorist organizations. Now, machine learning is critical to keeping our users safe. In the second quarter of 2022, of the 4.5 million videos removed for violating our community guidelines, 93% of those videos were first flagged by machine detection. Of those first flagged by machines, 68% received fewer than 10 views before they were removed. In addition to policy efforts, our systems connect viewers to credible, authoritative videos, sources like the US Holocaust Memorial Museum and the United Nations, by surfacing this content higher in search results and through recommendations. For Holocaust-related searches, we include information panels at the top of results and directly under videos, which points people to additional content. To complement our efforts to raise authoritative content, we also reduce recommendations to borderline content, which represents just a fraction of what is watched on YouTube. Our human evaluators hail from around the world and are trained through a set of detailed, publicly available ratings guidance. Taken together, all of our responsibility work around recommendations has shown real impact. Watch time of authoritative news is up dramatically and borderline viewing is down. Finally, we reward our trusted creators. Millions of channels from over 90 different countries earn revenue from their videos by participating in our YouTube Partner Program, or YPP. Through YPP, creators earn revenue generated from advertising that is shown to viewers before or during a video. This revenue from ads is shared between YouTube and the creator, with the creator receiving the majority share, thus enabling creators to directly profit from their work. Responsibility is and will continue to be our #1 priority. Our business depends on it. We have made huge progress making our community safer, but we know that our work is not yet done, nor will it ever be. We're committed to continuing investments in the teams, technology, and product features to make sure YouTube continues to be a place where people come to be informed and inspired. We know that in Europe, the Digital Services Act will require new transparency measures, and our teams are heads down, focused on compliance ahead of the key deadlines later this summer. Thank you for the opportunity to appear today, and I look forward to the debate and your questions.
Thank you so much, David. Before I turn the floor over to Lara Levitt, Felix, do you mind muting your microphone?
It is muted.
No, it's not. That's ours.
Oh, okay.
Thank you. And with that, I pass the floor to Lara Levitt, Public Policy Manager for EU Affairs from Meta. You have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you so much. Honorable members of the Interparliamentary Task Force, experts from the organizations we had the pleasure of meeting yesterday, let me start by thanking you for having Meta here. You've thanked us for showing up. I think it's the bare minimum that we can do is to be here to answer your questions. And I hope that the conversation continues not just today, and I look forward to hearing questions today, but going forward as well. It takes a huge amount of courage and vulnerability to share the kinds of examples all of you have today, and I want to acknowledge that and thank you for it and say that we hear you and we're committed to protecting the Jewish people that use our services. With the time that I have today, I'd like to first do a brief recap of our pertinent policies. I'll focus on the hate speech policy, but understand and acknowledge that many other policies are very pertinent to fighting anti-Semitism online. I'll then give you a couple of figures on our enforcement under those policies. Most recently, we published those figures quarterly, publicly, online. And I'll finish with a few comments on the EU landscape, trying to ground this conversation in this building, which is quite a special place for us to have this conversation. So let me start with a brief recap on our hate speech policy. The policy is designed to be enforced at scale, globally. And that's how we have to think when we prepare the definitions under which we enforce. That means that we strive to build community standards that are clear and that can be applied in very different contexts. You have prompted us already on how we define the terms that behind anti-Semitism, so let me give you a couple of examples. We define hate speech as a direct attack against people on the basis of protected characteristics. People as opposed to a concept, protected characteristic, which will cover race, ethnicity, religion, and several others. And in terms of the direct attack, we further categorize this with 3 different tiers. The first one covers violent or dehumanizing speech, and that includes Holocaust denial and distortion. It also includes harmful stereotypes that are historically linked to intimidation, exclusion, or violence. The second tier are statements of inferiority or expressions of contempt, disgust, dismissal, as well as cursing. And the third tier is covering calls for exclusion or segregation. Of course, as I mentioned at the outset, the efforts to combat anti-Semitism cannot and should not be limited to a hate speech policy. That would miss much of the nuance behind anti-Semitism and frankly behind any discriminating speech against protected characteristics. That's why we have robust policies against violence and incitement, harassment, bullying, as well as dangerous organizations, to name a few. Content that violates these policies is removed, and actors who repeatedly breach our community standards are warned and sanctioned across the amount of strikes that they've committed. We don't simply think of this as a piece of content per piece of content issue. It's also a bad actor issue. And even beyond what is happening on our platform, we also need to go further and understand offline trends to remain aware of new and evolving threats to Jewish people around the world. And several of you have mentioned this already. We do this in 3 main ways. First, Meta has chosen to dedicate a specific position focused on working with the Jewish diaspora. My colleague Jordana Cutler, who unfortunately could not be here today, and who several of you I know have already met, leads this work to make sure that we better understand the issues that negatively impact Jewish communities across the world and that we address them in real time. Secondly, we see stakeholder engagement as part and parcel of policy building. We should not write our rules alone, and it shouldn't be just a few of us writing them either. We have a team that is dedicated to stakeholder engagement for policy development, and they work with a range of NGOs, academics, thought leaders to get their views on our policies and our enforcement. In the case of the Jewish community, we hold a series of regular meetings with major organizations, which opportunities to listen, to share information, and have substantive dialogue. And I want to stress here that these conversations are always a really important opportunity for humility on our part and a space where we have to acknowledge where we fall short of the expectations of these experts. To give you a couple of examples of the ways that these engagements have resulted in real-time changes and updates in our policies, we updated our policy to ensure that it covers harmful stereotypes historically linked to intimidation, exclusion, or violence, which I mentioned at the outset in the first tier of our policy. And that covers the claim that Jews run the world, for instance. We also continue to build on the insight that we receive from experts on the ground on slurs. We all know that these slurs evolve over time, but that there are also techniques to try to avoid our enforcement and have coded hate speech. I will rush on. We
over 5 minutes.
Yeah, I'll close, yes. I'll root this conversation in the European context. The context in which we're in has the Digital Services Act that's about to be implemented. We also have the EU Code of Conduct on illegal hate speech. These are bold initiatives that combine legislation as well as co-regulation. And we hope that the EU in this way can bring a valuable insight on how we can tackle anti-Semitism and more generally content issues online with a combination of voluntary as well as mandatory measures. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And with that, I pass the floor to Claire Dillet, Head of Government Affairs, Finance and EU from Twitter.
Many thanks, Mr. Lega. Many thanks to the honorable member of the task force for inviting Twitter to speak today. And also thank you to ACG to organize the session yesterday with civil society representative and tech expert. We are very glad to be here. We want to be part of the discussion and to have this exchange with you. We think it's very important. I think we would not disagree with what you've been all saying. We know that as social media platform, we have power, we have some power and a responsibility to make sure that our users are safe. So we think that it's important to have the discussion and feedback from you. I will start by saying that Twitter strongly condemns anti-Semitism in all its forms, and we are working to make Twitter a place where conversations are both safe and wanted. User safety is our number one priority in the company, and we have no tolerance for this form of hateful conduct on the platform. At the same time, I also want to say that we are fully aware that we still have efforts to make to improve the efficiency in fighting against online hate and anti-Semitism, and this has to be a thorough and constant work. But please be assured that we are very committed to it, and this is also why we are grateful to have this discussion with you today. I would like to talk a bit about, our moderation policy and how we enforce them, and then how we cooperate with law enforcement authorities, civil society, and our preparation work under the DSA as part of this of my intervention. First of all, our policy and enforcement are continually being updated based on the trend that we see on the platform and the feedback that we receive from both our community of users, but also our various stakeholders, including lawmakers. So this is why it's important to have discussion today, regulators and civil society partners. We've made progress in the last few years to address anti-Semitism on the platform by updating our policies, notably on violent event denial that would cover the Holocaust denial, but also facts associated with the Holocaust. Our enforcement guidelines, we are enforcing much more strongly on this kind of content, and notably on harassing users with this kind of content, and strengthening our enforcement also with developing proactive tools to be more effective. The way we are drafting our policy and developing them is that we are trying to maintain a balance between preserving a space for free expression, criticism of ideas, institutions and practices, but at the same time, we want to draw the line with content that would target individuals with violence, abuse and hate that can't be tolerated on our platform. I think, Representative Kotler-Wunsch, you mentioned the definition of the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance that was mentioned in the last hearing in September 2022. We've been working with this definition in mind, and we are trying to align our policy with it and how we enforce on them. And so based on the definition, what I can say now is that for some of its aspects, we would not tolerate this content on Twitter. So for instance, everything that would be calling for, aiding or justifying the killing or harming of Jews in the name of a radical ideology or an extremist view or religion would be prohibited under our policies. Also, tropes will be action under our policies. So for example, we would take action on tweets assuming that Jews control the media or the banks. That's just an example, but to give you an idea. We also have an insistment of fear policy that would cover the generalization that would portray the whole community of being harmful to society or comparing the community to criminals. We would also take action under our policies. Of course, as I was saying, denying the Holocaust or the fact associated with the Holocaust would be prohibited, as well as accusing people of inventing or exaggerating the Holocaust, which would be considered as a violation of our policy. And finally, we prohibit hateful imagery on Twitter, including Nazi symbol and other forms of anti-Semitic and white nationalist symbol. This doesn't cover all of the definition yet, but we also have to take into consideration expression of political speech and criticism of idea. So in some cases, we might take a bit of a more nuanced approach to allow for some forms of speech. And we understand, there might be some friction, with what we are doing and the definition, but we are very happy to discuss and explain our rationale there. I would like to touch upon briefly all the policy that would be covered under anti-Semitism and also their enforcement actions. So I think it's a bit the same case as with Meta. Anti-Semitism would sit across many different policy of Twitter. There is no a specifically dedicated policy. So there would be policy under hateful conduct, abuse, harassment, glorification of violence, violent speech, violent hateful identities. And I'll go super quickly through enforcement because I think I've been talking for too long. Okay, so we enforce on user reports. So this is why it's very important for users to report the content. Sometimes we are having this discussion with stakeholders and they're saying that they are still seeing the content on Twitter. It's very important for users to report it, and we are acting on the basis of this report. Users can report under our policies, but also under local laws. For instance, for Europe, that would be the law in Germany, Austria, and France. And we would remove this content under this law, and we have special in-app reporting. We are developing proactive tool, as I was saying. And then I just want to share the figures, and then I'm going to stop there.
We have 6 minutes already.
Okay, sorry. So no figures for you. I will share it in the question. Thank you very much.
I'm glad I apologized in advance for cutting you off because otherwise we won't have time to make all the 10 MPs having questions and also the possibility of a second round. So again, sorry for being blunt, but that's how we have to do this. And now we move into the questioning rounds where all of us have 5 minutes each to use the way we want, ask the questions and have a dialogue with you. And I'm taking the privilege as a host to do mine first. So I would like to, I would start by asking you, David, from YouTube. A while ago, I myself tried, we did a test together with German television channels, and I reported some videos with clear anti-Semitic content about, the Holocaust denial. We all have seen it with 6 million cookies. How do you have time to bake 6 million cookies? With the reference that that's impossible to do under 45 years as a Holocaust denial example, which I reported. It was never removed. I didn't report it as an MEP. I reported it as a person. It was never removed. So this morning, I just had a hunch. So I asked the thing that we all of us maybe play with now, the ChatGPT and similar bots. So I asked ChatGPT, I took that text and asked ChatGPT, is this anti-Semitic? And it said, no, it's not, it's about baking. And then I asked, if you use it together with the IRA definition, do you consider it to be anti-Semitic? And it said, absolutely. It connects to Holocaust denial and showed examples. So I can understand that all of your companies up here, all your moderators don't have a chance of understanding every connection to anti-Semitism. We have a system that works, that so many countries use, that so many others use to define anti-Semitism. So please explain to me your hesitancy and reluctance of using a global definition that works, and also your own definition. How does that differ from the IRA definition?
So, David, thank you for your question. And I think actually in framing your question, you highlight the challenge that we all face here, which is how you make these decisions and how you determine what isn't hate speech, what isn't anti-Semitic. And actually, it does demonstrate the vital importance of the human moderator.
I'm just interrupting you, sorry, because we only have 5 minutes each, so please move towards IRA directly. Otherwise, I don't have time for my follow-up.
Okay.
Sorry.
That's fine, but I think if we're going to have a dialogue, we need to engage in a dialogue, David. And I think it's important that I frame this. The community guidelines are enforced by humans. So when you flag a piece of content, a human reviewer will look at it. And when they look at it, our community guidelines largely reflect the IHRA definition in that we prohibit content that incites hatred or violence against the Jewish community or Jewish individuals. And that includes incitement to destroy property. We prohibit content that attributes harmful or well-established conspiracy theories, which could be what you're referring to, and indeed content that trivializes the Holocaust, which also could be content that you're referring to. I can't speak to that particular piece of content, but obviously if you were to send me the URL, we could review it again. The point being, it is important that these policies are overseen by humans, by people. We employ people to do that, and that they set against the way that we define the policies. There will sometimes be nuances, and sometimes things get missed. And I will happily pick that up if you flag it to me.
That was just an example, but I was asking more about the differences between your policies and the IRA definitions. How come that so many miss these kinds of posts?
Well, I can only respond to the individual piece of content that you've highlighted, and I've explained the policies, and I'd be happy to look at that content again.
Yeah, it was an example. What about Meta? Your views on this?
On the definition aspect, you mean, right? Yeah.
And why your hesitancy to use IRA?
I don't think we have hesitancy in using the definition. We found the definition extremely helpful. We've leaned on it for several aspects of our definition of hate speech, of our definition of hate speech, as well as the way that it's enforced. And similarly to what David outlined, there's several of its points that are directly in our policies. So calls to harm against Jewish people, dehumanizing Jewish people, the denying or distorting the Holocaust, as well as the claims that Jews around the world, as I outlined in my opening. All of these elements of the IRA definition are reflected in our policies. Having said that, as I mentioned at the outset, of course, the hate speech policy is but one segment, right? But it's something that we've leaned on and that we've built into our community standards.
So if all your aspects, as you say, are reflected in the IRA definition, why won't you simply use the IRA definition? Because that would also be a statement that a company like Meta adheres to the same guidelines as the rest of the world.
Yeah, I appreciate the question. We need to build a community standards for a global application and a implementation at scale, and that's why we've built all of them for that purpose. So we have used it as a resource, and we've built it into community standards that can be applied in a way that is consistent at scale by our systems.
And with that, I am out of my time, so I have to be strict against myself too, and even if it's frustrating. So I'll pass the floor to Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman-Schultz.
The mic is not. There we go.
I think you need to turn off your mic,
Thank you so much. So while monitoring 65 reinstated Twitter accounts in February 2023, the Anti-Defamation League collected over 5,000 examples of virulent anti-Semitism from 2,173 accounts engaged in the reinstated accounts networks. The tropes and narratives in these tweets both included coded and overt references to hateful commentary toward Jews. As you likely know, coded language is when people use words that seem neutral on the surface but are intended to mean something else, for example, using globalist to refer to Jewish people. Coded language can be challenging to track because it changes frequently, differs by region and language, and is usually not blatant, overt anti-Semitism that almost everyone can easily identify, as David just referenced. Platforms must invest in stronger machine learning algorithms and natural language processing models to identify patterns, misspellings, and symbols used to violate content policies. And this should be done in conjunction with human moderators who are trained to spot possible coded language to assess whether it is hiding a user's hateful intent. So I'd like to better understand how Twitter combats coded hate. So if you can answer the following questions. What training do your moderators receive to detect coded language? How do you utilize technology to detect coded language? And are users able to report tweets and specifically designate the content they are reporting as coded in nature? And I only have 5 minutes, so if you could answer as cogently as possible.
Thank you for the question. So,
and if you could speak slowly, because it's a little challenging.
Thank you for the question. Our moderator do receive training in local context and training based on the different policies that Twitter will apply. Like I was saying in my intervention, we invest in proactive tools to be able to enforce better on the platform. And actually, we have list of keywords that we would enforce on because, as you know, we are talking about text, so it's a bit more complicated than images. And in the list of new terms that we just integrated into the system, we would include, for instance, globalist, they, them, because, you know, sometimes it is used in an anti-Semitic context.
So I'm sorry, just so I can interrupt you and get a more clear answer. Do you train moderators so that they can receive an understanding of how to detect coded language?
Yeah, of course, they are trained about, you know, enforcing our policy. So they are trained about understanding our policy and then enforcing on them.
Not just about enforcing your policies, but about what to look for in terms of coded language. How to recognize coded language that is direct and overt and hit you over the head anti-Semitism.
They are trained to recognize them. I mean, coded language, do you mean, I don't understand, sorry, what do you mean by coded language, I think?
Okay. It's important, and what I'd like to ask you is, will Twitter commit to implementing reporting options that allow users to flag coded language, because I don't think you do that now, veiled incitement, and nodes of hate as they come across them? We need that commitment.
Yes, but I think this is what we are doing. You know, hateful content is forbidden on Twitter. If you report on our tool, you can report under hateful content, and then they would take into consideration the tweet. And on the tweet, like I was saying, we have a list of terms that we consider as being anti-Semitic, and it's not only us considering it. It's by working with a civil society partner that we would take them into account. I'll give you an example, but for instance, I'm working in the CRIF in France, and every time I'm discussing with their representative, and they would tell me, you know, for instance, the term Dragon Celeste, it's used in an anti-Semitic way, so you have to take into consideration in the way you apply your policy. We are adapting our keywords, and then we would take some new term into consideration. As I was saying, we would take into consideration they, them, globalist, Zionazi. Sorry, I try to take the one that are not the worst.
So just to make sure I'm clear, so users, you say, are able to report tweets and specifically designate the content that they're reporting as coded in nature.
Yes, exactly.
As coded.
So I'm not sure what you say about coded, but
in other words, replacing a word, referencing something obliquely the example that the example that David used about 6 million cookies, those are that's coded language that doesn't directly hit you over the head with as anti-Semitic.
So yes, I mean, this specific term I would not know because I will need to check internally, but what we know is that more and more people are trying to circumvent the Twitter rules, so they would use terms that are not exactly straightforward to avoid the rules, and so the effort that we are making is to adapt to that.
I'd appreciate if you check, because I don't think you're giving me an accurate answer. But I'll come back to it in another question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. With that, I will give the floor to Anthony Housefather. I will knock the table when you have 30 seconds left, so you know, all of you. Thank you. You have the floor.
I'm not clear what she's saying.
I can't. Thank you very much. I understand and appreciate the idea of context, but I have a very short time. I'm going to ask some questions that we asked last year, and so I'd appreciate a yes or no answer, not anything more than a yes or no. Then I'll give you a chance to get context if I get there. First, last year I asked the question, if you had a post on your platform or a video on YouTube that said Jews are all white supremacists that support apartheid, would that constitute something that your platform would violate the guidelines of your platform, and would you take it down? None of your companies were able to answer this question last year. You have had a year to think about it. Would you take this down, David?
Because context is everything, and I mean, you want me to say yes and no, but the point is...
Jews are all white supremacists that support apartheid. It's not something that's criticizing that. That's all that it says.
But it's really important that we don't try to speculate on what might or might not be considered to be against the community guidelines. We train
You've
our
had a year.
moderators.
Thank you very much. Meta, you've had a year.
But if we can have a dialogue on this, I really want
we attempted to have a dialogue. I mean, to me, the answer is self-evident. So I don't think there needs to be a dialogue on Jews are all white supremacists that support apartheid. I don't know how you could possibly, you talked about how your guidelines covered all of this type of speech, and now you're telling me there's debate about when somebody simply says one thing, Jews are all white supremacists that support apartheid, if it violates the guidelines.
But we have clear education, documentary, scientific, and artistic guidelines as well, where we look at content in the context.
I can see how that could be artistic.
In every case,
thank you.
we take that into
please.
account.
Yeah, I'm going to disappoint you, but we don't comment on specific pieces of content. I don't have that mandate. I simply don't. I can talk to you at length about our policies and discuss.
This was asked last year. You should have been prepared to have come this year to answer that question. I'm sorry.
And I
Twitter?
just want to mention it's not a lack of preparation. It's simply that we don't, in this kind of context, comment on specific pieces of content without having them seen and going through a content.
But I understand, but you come here and you tell us generalizations that how well you do in taking things down. And then when everybody tells us they report things to you, and I've had examples where I've reported multiple things to Twitter and Meta, they've never come down or very rarely come down when I think it's self-evident they're anti-Semitic. Here I've given an example, an illustration that to me is clearly anti-Semitic. It's a generalization about Jewish people. It's a negative generalization, and yet you're saying that you can't answer that question. Twitter, do you have an answer?
David, you need to turn yours off. You can only have two on it.
Sorry, it's not to save time, but I think, like I was saying at the beginning, if it's a generalization that would see a community as being a nuisance to society, yes, we would take it down. And then I think, like in every situation, like in every decision of justice, it's not specific to social media, but like any decision that you have to make, you have to see the content and how it is framed. I'm very happy for you to send it to me at the end of this session, and then we can have a look, and I'm sure it's the same for my colleagues.
Another question that I asked last year, and I'll ask again, if we do an independent audit of your platform, will you cooperate? You've again had a year, we've followed this up with a letter. Will you cooperate with an independent audit commissioned by organization of your platform? And it's dealing with anti-Semitic posts. I'll go again in that order. David?
We publish our community guidelines enforcement report. We have provided researcher access to our API. We are going to be subject to the DSA risk assessment and to the independent audits function under the DSA. So there's going to be a lot of auditing and transparency of our policies.
But if our organization hires someone to do an independent audit, will you cooperate?
I've just outlined how we're cooperating with a whole series of obligations and indeed voluntary openness.
I don't really hear an answer either. Meta?
We have similar transparency quarterly, as I mentioned, right, as well as DSA that is upcoming with risk assessments and reporting. And we also have a significant auditing and testing under the EU.
I understand all of this. We're speaking about our organization of parliamentarians from around the world working with civil society organizations. If we ask to do an independent audit, will you cooperate with us?
And my answer is that what would be extremely productive is to be able to sit down with the results of these existing transparency measures and discuss how they're falling short and go from there as a next step.
Well, we've tried that last September. We've gone for almost a year, and none of your platforms have engaged with us on this.
Well, we're here today.
Twitter?
5 seconds.
Okay, I'm so sorry. That doesn't give you a chance.
I think, like we are not hostile to it. We could see how we can work together. I think, as David and Lara were saying, we have to do a big work under the DSA of risk assessment, risk mitigation. I think antisemitism will be one of the risks. We will do an independent audit as part of this, but after we pass that, we can still talk and see what more we can do.
Thank you. And with that, we turn over to Michal Kotlebunch. You have the floor.
Thank you. I think I'll just follow up and drill down and ask very specifically each, and I'll start with Twitter because you haven't had a chance. So, for example, on my own feed, stop giving money and weapons to apartheid Israel to murder Palestinian women and children. Would that be something removed typically from Twitter?
Thank you for the question. So I'm not trust and safety. I'm not doing moderation. So this is usually content that...
Okay, let me ask you another one.
Okay.
Zionism is international. If not, it wouldn't be buying politicians and influencing policy in other countries, demanding worldwide adoption of the fascist IRA definition, collecting welfare payments to maintain a Zionist supremacist state, threatening free speech and rights and democracies. Would that be removed?
I would say the same question. I think the best is that after this session, you send me this example, and then I can take it internally to my colleague, and we can see if we would
thank
actually
you.
them.
Thank you. I'm going to move on to Meta for a moment and ask, and I'm going to show this picture because this is George Soros. You may be familiar. This is up on Facebook. When an old white Zionist billionaire funds a black rights movement, it's not because he cares about justice. It's because he's using it to fuel civil unrest that will lead to martial law and the start of the New World Order. Okay, by Facebook hate policy?
I think you would really want us to spend some time and thought on moderating content rather than give you a snap answer.
Really? Okay.
I completely appreciate the need to surface the content to us as well as to this group.
Thank you.
But
Thank
I
you.
can't comment on specific
That's
pieces of
okay.
content
I understand
off
that none of you are authorized to comment on specifics. But we are playing whack-a-mole. On YouTube, I'll say that Ye's video and interview was exposed to millions, maybe billions around the world, peddling anti-Semitic hate. And by the time it was removed, if it was removed, when it was removed, it was shared and reshared and reshared. So here's the thing, and here's the thing that we keep coming up against. It is that this is not about whack-a-mole. It's not about feelings. I don't need you to acknowledge any of our feelings or our children's feelings. It's about facts. We are here to talk about facts, and it's not about Jews or Israel. We are a minority. There's 15 million Jews in the entire world. This is about your platforms, policies. Now, you've created these reach across hate policies, but anti-Semitism has a definition in the real world that we all live in. It's been accepted by 41 countries, by over 1,000 entities, and you are just a couple of those entities. And what we are saying to you is this whack-a-mole approach where we are going to keep reporting and playing this game. There's 15 million of us, and there are coded language replacements like I am a Zionist and I'm a proud Zionist. There are many Jewish Zionists, the majority of Jews self-define as Zionists. There are many non-Jewish Zionists. If Zionist codes Jew, that gets right through that speech policy of protected characteristics. So we have a couple of ways to going around this. Top down, adopt IRA. Bottom up, add Zionist to protected characteristic. But all we're still doing is playing whack-a-mole. And every time we knock down one head and you remove one post, which is being shared with billions by the time you remove it, there's 100 more. And so what I think that this task force is trying to say to you, and I'm sorry, again, we started by saying and prefaced by saying this is not personal and it's not about feelings. It's about the companies you represent with tremendous power that comes with unbelievable responsibility. And you speak about responsibility and you speak about hate speech and you say that, I'm going to quote, you're going to fight anti-Semitism. How are you fighting it without defining it? You say you're committed to identifying anti-Semitism, but how are you defining it? And how are you enabling that commitment to see through if there is not a definition? And guess what? There is a benchmark definition. The EU strategy uses that same benchmark definition. So with the transparency mechanisms that you're going to create according to DSA, you have to use that benchmark definition. And I just, to echo Anthony Hesfather's request, we will, no matter what, continue with this demand for transparency, because we can't afford for 15 million Jews around the world to be victimized. If you can afford it, and I guess you can, we can't. The world can't. And so that notion that what you're doing, just to finish the sentence, is Holocaust denial, the past, never again is a prospective statement. It's about the future. It's about the present and the future, and we are here to protect the present and the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Michal. And with that, I pass the floor over to Congressman Brad Schneider. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, and thank you for joining us. As it was said, you don't have to be here, but we're glad you're here, and we appreciate your thoughts on how important this is. And I appreciate the difficult position we're putting you in, asking you to opine on specific examples. The fact is, these are existing examples of anti-Semitism that are on social media. And as my colleague quoted Elie Wiesel, the Holocaust didn't begin with the gas chambers. It began with words, and words matter. You're hearing us ringing the alarm. Anti-Semitism is growing and increasingly affecting individuals, communities, and even entire nations. We're dealing with it every single day. And social media isn't inherently the cause of anti-Semitism, but it is a vector in which anti-Semitism is spread. Social media allows anti-Semitism spreading at an accelerated pace. It amplifies it and multiplies anti-Semitism in ways we've never experienced. And let me try to explain coded language, not to talk down, but you asked about it. It's the dog whistles that people hear and know what it means, even though it might not mean anything to the rest of us. So you can't use the word Jews, but maybe you use the word Abrahams instead, and it's not going to trigger the flag that says this is anti-Semitism. You can't say Jews are bad, so you say globalists are bad, or Zionism, or Zionists are internationalists. And the code's there, but it doesn't trigger the flags that gets the algorithms or even the human reviewers to say this is anti-Semitism. And you can't say the Holocaust didn't happen, so you talk about 6 million cookies can't be baked in a short period of time. So I like analogies, and the shepherd's herds don't create the wolves, but it attracts them. And sometimes you need to do more than just putting up a fence. Sometimes you have to put guards to watch for the wolves, and sometimes you even have to work to remove the wolves from the range. This is the role we're looking to you for, to make sure that the fences are there, that the guidelines are there, that you can protect. And it's not just about anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism is one of the oldest forms of hate. It's often the canary in the mine, but where there's anti-Semitism, there's other hate. And where anti-Semitism spreads, other hate is following. The attacks are growing, and the systems are evolving. So broadly, my questions, and I like what was said here. What % of anti-Semitic posts do you think you are capturing and either flagging, marking as anti-Semitic, or removing off your platforms? And maybe I'll go in reverse order and start with Twitter.
Thank you. So I have the figures with me, but I don't.
All right, let me come back and ask.
Sorry. I haven't. Sorry, I have too many papers. We published a blog post in April this year, so it's quite recent. And for hateful conduct, as you know, we take this policy all together. We action on 1,085,000 accounts. We suspended 100,000 accounts. And we removed 1,500,000 content.
How about for Meta?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I didn't have time to get some numbers in the opening. So we have numbers for Q1 2023 on the amount of content that we take down under hate speech. But because your question is on essentially what's left, what I wanted to share is a slightly different number on prevalence. So that's trying to get at how many of the views of the content on Facebook and on Instagram overall is hate speech. In Q1 2023, that was between 0.01 and 0.02%. So that means out of every 10,000 views on Instagram or on Facebook, 1 or 2 are hate speech. So that's the content that we estimate is left after we've removed what we have removed, which hopefully is the most responsive.
How much isn't getting removed? So what we're saying, we know from reports by ADL in the United States, reports elsewhere, anti-Semitism is prevalent, it's growing. More and more people are experiencing anti-Semitism online. I think there's a report from Israel that 80% of Israeli youth experience anti-Semitism online. The number is huge, and I'm out of time, so I will yield appropriately.
Thank you so much. And with that, I will pass the floor to Member of Parliament Sarah Jones.
Thank you. Can you just start with just a quick yes or no, or a question to all of you? Will you publish your slide decks that you use for training your moderators on anti-Semitism?
No, and there's a good reason for that, which is that it is not sensible, in our view, to give signals to people about how they can get around our policies. There is a real challenge here that bad actors will work out how to circumvent policies. That sort of thing is exactly what they look for.
Could you share them just with one of our trusted kind of anti-Semitism organisations? There's many in the room. We could just pick.
Well, we do have a very close and ongoing dialogue with the ADL, and the ADL work with our Intel desk, who are the group of people within YouTube that look at the changing landscape, the changing dialogues and memes and the like.
Could you share the slide deck with ADL potentially?
I'd have to check whether or not that conversation actually already happens.
And come back to us. That would be really helpful. Yes, Meta. Yes.
I'm actually not certain that we have a deck as opposed to a document, as opposed to 17,000 different documents on how we train our content moderators across several different policies. But as David mentioned, we would not make those documents public because of the circumvention risk.
But you could potentially to the ADL or another kind of trusted.
Yeah, similarly to what David mentioned, I would have to check what has already been shared and what kind of conversations are already ongoing on the content moderation.
If you could come back to us on that, that would be great. Yes, Twitter.
Same, the content moderator has an expertise that is not only based on deck, but on, all the research that they are doing to understand the threats and the trend on our platform. I think, we have organized meetings with them in the past. We're very happy to do it. Again, we have to be careful with sharing.
Forgive me, sorry, I didn't understand. You've organized a...
We've organized a meeting with our trust and safety team and stakeholder. We are very happy to do it, and for them to explain, like their work and how they are evolving in their practice. But again, like sharing this material externally without context, we also have to be aware that, this can be also used to be circumvented. I think we would go back to the coded terms conversation.
Can I just ask a follow-up question to Twitter? Your trust and safety team you mentioned, how many have been let go since Elon Musk took over?
1/3. 1/3 of the team.
1/3?
1/3 of the whole team.
Sorry, forgive me. 1/3, okay. And who is doing that function now in their place?
But there is a team which is called Trust and Safety, who is in charge of moderation at Twitter.
Okay. A question to all of you as well. Have you got trusted partner organisations in all jurisdictions across the world? or just in certain jurisdictions when it comes to tackling anti-Semitism?
I can't answer that every single jurisdiction is covered, but certainly we have relationships across the world.
Yeah, similarly, across countries where we're active, and of course in the EU under DSA, we will need to have trusted flaggers as mandated by the DSA and all the member states as well.
It will be the same for us. We will be working with trusted flagger under DSA. We have some partners. We don't have the financial and capacity to cover all the world, but we are trying to get better.
Can I just ask a follow-up on Twitter? You've just ended your trusted flagger program, but you'll have to. People have been told that they're not going to be part of it anymore.
I can tell you, I work with trusted flaggers in France every day, so no.
In the UK, this is.
I will ask my colleague Nif in the UK, but I don't think so. I think she's still working with NGO partners.
Okay, that's definitely what we've been told. And another follow-up question, sorry, for Twitter. Your data used to be publicly available for researchers and developers and moderators to see, and that's been closed, and you can understand that on commercial reasons, but other platforms have agreed to share that data, not in its minute detail, but the trends with trusted researchers. Would you be prepared to do the same?
Should I answer? Okay. So we closed the free access to the API because Twitter was paying for it. Twitter has been avoiding bankruptcy 2 months ago, so we have, for people that use it to contribute.
It's whether you would do what others would do and share that data with trusted research.
So we'll have the legal obligation to do it under DSA, and we are making public the algorithm and some of our products as well. We will have an academic access to the API, but it's being built at the moment. We just have to change the system how it works.
Thank you. Sarah, could you turn off your microphone, please? And with that, I will give the floor to Orit Farkasha-Cohen, member of Knesset. You have the floor.
Thank you, and thank you for being here. Today, I'm an Israeli parliament member in the Israeli parliament, but during 2020, I was a Minister of Strategic Affairs of the State of Israel, responsible partly for incitement against Israel. And I want to shed a light about the issue of anti-Semitism disguised as anti-Israeli. During COVID time, we witnessed a very extreme rise in anti-Semitism and violence in the social media platforms, and as you are probably aware of. In May 2020, Khamenei, the leader of Iran, tweeted a series of tweets promoting armed violence attack against Israel and Israeli Jews. Khamenei, this leader, dehumanized Israel and the Jewish people, comparing Israel to the coronavirus at the time, declaring, today the COVID-19 is a reality. Should it be accepted or fought, the long-lasting virus of Zionism will be uprooted. He also described the Zionist regime and its criminals supported as a rabid predatory dog. He repeatedly described Israel as a cancerous tumor and employed classic anti-Semitic word choosing of Jewish polluters and Jewish corporation owners. Now, these tweets were conducted worldwide. The US Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, the EU High Representative for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, the UN Special Coordinators, and so on. When I looked over these tweets, it was clearly a violation of the Twitter's policy. And I don't want to waste the time going over the policies that you just mentioned in this hearing about categorizing and dehumanizing Israel and Jews as common. And what I did is I approached Twitter's CEO at the time, writing a letter, Jack Dorsey at the time, asking Twitter to remove those tweets. What I got in response was a refusal to do so, partly based on the fact that we're talking about a political leader. My question to you today, and I know it's of course targeted more on Twitter, is would you have answered differently today when we are 3 years later? Do you think that the argument that somebody holds a public figure and actually has a bigger audience to echo anti-Semitism is a reason to give this guy an immunity? I would argue that the opposite is right. And in my view, incitement is incitement is incitement. In fact, when we look at history, the biggest anti-Semitic was Hitler. He was a political leader. So my question is, do you think that Twitter should have ignored my letter? Shouldn't it take it down? And do you think that today it would have been taken down?
So it seems that Twitter answered to your letter, so I don't think it's been ignored. I think, Twitter didn't shy away from suspending account of the former president of the US, so, it means that no politician leaders would be above the rules. The rule would apply to every user on Twitter, and so as well to Ayatollah Khamenei. And so if the content is reporting, then we would look at it against our rule, and then we would take action if it violates the rules or not.
So can you say it shortly? Do you think that these kind of tweets are a violation of Twitter policy? Because what I'm trying to focus here, that there are very nice policies put in place for everybody to read, but the enforcement is discriminatory, and the discretion of your enforcing your policy is unclear. And I wanted to know whether you think that the answer I got, that when we're talking about a politician, there is a double standard in a way that, I would think that you should be stricter with people who are leaders and have millions of followers. So my question is, do you think this is a violation of your policy?
There is no double standard for the users. It's not about who you are. It's about whether you violate the policy or not. There can be newsworthy criteria to take into account, in the sense that, we also want for people to be accountable for what they say, especially when they are politicians. I think from what you've been saying, probably some of it, we would take action on, but I would need to see, specifically what it is.
Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, I pass the floor to Kirsty Blackman, Member of Parliament.
Thank you. In a couple of sentences, and obviously without giving away anything in terms of confidentiality or anything, could you please each tell me in order what your algorithms are designed to do? Just in a couple of sentences, what's the point of your algorithms? What do they do?
Goodness me, I'm not sure a couple of sentences does it. Look, so the algorithm takes in about 80 billion signals and works out what it is that is going to interest the viewer, the user, and recommends content to them. That's it in its basic sense.
Perfect. Netta?
Yeah, the underlying mission of the algorithm is to surface content to you that you will be interested in. And it does that by gathering a set of signals on what content you've interacted before, who your connections are, who your friends are, and so on. But also by gathering signals of content that's of low quality or potentially violating and decreasing the circulation or visibility of that, if not removing it. So it works in both ways. It pushes what's relevant to you, and it removes or decreases what's damaging the integrity of the platform.
And Twitter?
The algorithm works in the same way. It's all public. It's been published on GitHub in March, so you can have a look and see by yourself how it works. And also you can choose whether you want your content to be organized by the algorithm or not, so in anti-chronological order.
Okay, and then in reverse order, when did you last risk assess your algorithm?
We are doing it right now because, under DSA, we have to do a risk assessment and have mitigation measures in place. So now we are doing the risk assessment of the algorithm.
Okay.
Yeah, similar answer. This is required under GSA, so it's ongoing. And it is generally an ongoing mission to figure out whether the algorithm is working as it's intended. So even prior to GSA, this was something that was ongoing within the company.
Indeed.
Yes, I mean, the algorithm takes into account, it changes all the time because it takes into account different signals, working out what is high quality and low quality content and what you want to see and what you may not want to see. And likewise, we will be part of the risk assessment under the DSA by the end of August.
Okay, moving on to a question about moderators. David, you talked about human moderators looking at all of your reports. Is it the case that that's all of the reports or all of the reports on anti-Semitism? Are they all looked at by human moderators?
All flagged content is looked at by a human moderator. So that will include under the hate speech vertical, and that will include anti-Semitism, yes.
Okay, thanks. Lara, is all of your flagged content looked at by human moderators?
I don't think I can say that all flag content is reviewed by human moderators, because some flag content, for instance, will be on things like behavior, things like fake accounts. So it's the way that the review system will work is that the algorithm is detecting the likely impact of violation of our community standards, the gravity of the community standards that's at play, as well as its potential virality. And based on those, it's ranked more or less high on the list of what has to be reviewed by human reviewers. So content that should be reviewed by human reviewers is when it requires context awareness and so on. But there are types of content where it's more behavior looking like fake accounts, or it's more, the signals that we're looking at are not text-based or context-based.
If you don't have a specific anti-Semitism reporting mechanism, how do you know whether or not something is classed as anti-Semitism when, how do you know whether or not it should be escalated to a human moderator without having that classification in the reporting structures?
So we don't classify our hate speech content based on the characteristic or the individual or demographic that's targeted. Instead, what our policy is based on is the tiers that I was mentioning in terms of gravity. So I'm not able to tell you how much of the hate speech content or bullying content or harassment content, for that matter, is specifically anti-Semitic. However, whether or not a human should review it isn't based on who the demographic is. It's on what kind of policy is at stake and what tier of gravity, sorry.
Okay, and Twitter, how much of your content is looked at by humans? The reports, I mean.
So we roll out the proactive measures, like I was saying with the list of keywords, that we take action on. But I would say for text and especially hateful conduct, the context is very important. So it's most of the time reviewed by human
Most
people.
of the time.
Yeah.
Okay. And then just a last question for Meta. You talked about having good relationships with Jewish stakeholders, and I'm really pleased about that. Do you not feel that there's more to do? Because every time you go into those meetings, have you ever gone into one of those meetings and had your Jewish stakeholders say, yeah, everything's fine?
I think if that was the case, perhaps we wouldn't need my job in the first place, right? There's no stakeholder meeting where everything is ever fine. And I think actually for politicians, hopefully it's a little bit the same. Your constituents are never all happy. Having said that, there is always room for improvement. And we say that every time, right? We don't shy away from the margin for improvement that we need to undertake.
Okay. Thanks, that's me done.
Thank you so much. We have 2 members left for this round. First, we have member of Knesset, Simcha Rothman. You have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you. So besides being here, I'm also the head of the Constitution Committee in Israel. And this issue interests a lot, of course, because we talk, and sometimes it's about the same concept and ideas: incitement to terror, incitement to anti-Semitism. I have to say I was a little bit troubled when you, Lara from Facebook, from Meta, you said you have a global policy. And I was very worried, because we know that when we talk about freedom of speech, and of course anti-Semitism is not part of freedom of speech, but the limiting and the actions needs to be taken by stakeholders, by governments, by you, is dependent a lot. The legal standard is what is the chance that it will create real life harm. It's one of the standards. And if you apply global policy, the same words, the same incitements that will, maybe if it will happen in South Korea, the effect will be minimum. It happened in Israel or in the US, where you have a large Jewish community, the effect will be different. So the fact that you have a global policy is troubling to me. And I would like to address later, how do you adopt your policies, or how should you adopt your policies locally? But the main problems that I learned from the other questions is you don't recognize anti-Semitism as something to report. It's part of a bigger picture I tried to report while we spoke here about I looked actually on Twitter, the Holocaust never happened. I looked it up and I found a video that 120,000 people watched in the past 18 hours. I'm not talking about that's saying that Reagan said that there was no Holocaust in Seoul. No, of course it's a lie. Of course it's Holocaust denial. I tried to report it myself. And sadly, I'm not trying to take down anything from other occasions, but in order, I had to think 3 times if what I'm seeing is concerning a group or about misinformation. I had to decide, and then does it deny violent acts like Sandy Hook and the Holocaust? Now, again, Sandy Hook was terrible, but there is no, this is the word anti-Semitism just do not appear in the reporting mechanism, definitely not IRA definition. And I had to guess if what I'm seeing, even how to report it and when to report it. So the fact that you are not adopting the IRA mechanism makes it hard for us to ask you relevant questions, and that's what we saw all around, and you give the answers. And the main problem, if I will ask any one of you, how many people are engaged in anti-Semitic activity and denying Holocaust on your platform? Just a figure. You have a figure at YouTube? How many people are engaged in Holocaust denial? Just let's take Holocaust denial.
Well, you mean how
people,
many
actual
videos?
eyeballs.
Because we think about videos rather than people.
Yes. How many eyeballs are engaged? If they will see a video talking about Holocaust denial, they will say like or share or post it. How many people?
Well, we don't have that number.
You don't have Facebook? You don't have Twitter?
We have a legal obligation not to do this. We can't do this by law.
No, I don't look for persons, numbers, general figures.
No, I'm saying we have a legal
So you know what's the
obligation,
problem?
but we have to change the law in
No,
Europe because that's
I didn't.
actually how it
You
works.
are the head of government affairs. You are the policy manager, and you are senior director of government affairs. I am sure that if I will have instead of you the marketing department, and I will ask them, how many people can I sell a swastika cake to? I'll get numbers. I'll get numbers and maybe even some kind of an offer how to sell to those people swastika-shaped cake or memorabilia from the Holocaust that does not look at the Holocaust as a bad thing. I'm sure your marketing department would be able to get to them because otherwise you wouldn't have any reason for them to stay online. So I'm asking again, and I think for the next hearing, maybe bring your marketing people and ask them what are my chances of selling swastika-shaped cake to people in the US, in Europe, or any other place. I'm sure they will have an answer.
The answer would be that it's completely forbidden to do that. Of course, an ad policy doesn't work the same as organic content. Ad policy, when there is an ad on Twitter, is more checked. In this case, this would not be allowed because, this would completely violate the ad policy on hateful conduct.
Indeed, the marketing people would not encourage you or make you an offer to sell any of those products. It would be forbidden and taken down. If I have a second, I would, yeah. Great. On the challenge of getting numbers, I appreciate the frustration with wanting numbers. We are in this position every day as public policy professionals as opposed to marketing in wanting these numbers as well, to sometimes be able to have a constructive discussion. It's not easy to get a number because engagement could be many different things, right? It could be about views, it could be about likes, it could be about who posted it and how often does someone post it. So actually coming up with a number is not as straightforward as it seems. On top of it, as we mentioned, or as I mentioned specifically on the meta policies, we don't categorize content based on the target group as opposed to the other specific elements of the policy. And there are good reasons for that. The way that we need to enforce our policies need to be global and consistent across the board.
No, it's not.
And yeah, I don't want to but I have an answer to your global question. Maybe we can take that separately.
And I can answer the question similarly. We've removed over 50,000 channels in Q4 2022 for hate speech violations. And so, we do have the data across the vertical of hate speech, but similar to the others, we don't break that out because there are many types of hate speech and it's not possible to do it for every single type.
It is possible, but okay.
Thank you. And with that, we turn to our final MP. Welcome, Alex Sobel. You have the floor.
Great, thank you. All Jewish parliamentarians suffer anti-Semitic abuse online. So I'm just going to contextualize my questions by giving 3 examples that happened to me. So in 2018, we had a debate for Holocaust Memorial Day where I talked about my own family's experience. Channel 4 ran the video on their Facebook page. There was a stream of anti-Semitic abuse. Neither Channel 4 nor Facebook take responsibility for the comments. In the end, through reporting mechanisms, after quite a long time, we managed to get some of the comments taken down. Later in 2018, I led a debate on the so-called Polish anti-defamation law, and I had a huge amount of particularly of anonymised hate on Twitter. And Jewish News in the UK's headline was Alex Sobel MP suffered stream abuse after leading debate on Holocaust law. This year, I called for the venues hosting Roger Waters' UK tour to remove the bookings, and there was a video by a particular group which personally attacked me and abused me anti-Semitically, which was carried on YouTube. So I've had it on all your platforms. In the UK, we've currently got the online safety bill going through Parliament. It is hopefully going to be world-leading piece of legislation. Within it, there is a duty of care for online content. There was initially, although it has been recently removed, although I'm hopeful that might change, a category of legal but harmful. So the sort of abuse that I was receiving and many people receive in most jurisdictions, not all, but in most jurisdictions would be considered legal but harmful. Do you feel that you've got a duty of care, and do you feel you have a duty to remove legal but harmful content? The second point is much of the abuse is anonymous. I even had sort of violent threats against me, and it was anonymised. In the end, through the work of the Community Security Trust, they managed to find the individual, and the police went to him and gave him a warning. But there is a real issue with anonymous abuse. And there is also an issue where people who are, to be fair, have been banned from your platforms or have left your platforms because your platforms have some restrictions, have moved to much more extreme platforms like 4chan, 8chan, etc. Have you made an assessment of movement off your platforms into these sort of darker, less well-regulated platforms? Thank you. I think there's probably a question for each of you there. So I don't maybe start with Claire.
Yes, of course. Thank you for the question. So for the movement to other platform, no, I mean, we are not really able to know, if these people are registering to other platform or not. I think this is something like independently from us. We know that they left us. We don't know if they've been somewhere else. And I'm sorry, your question completely in my mind. Could you just quickly repeat it?
Basically, in the UK, we're going to have duty of care on platforms.
Sorry. Yeah, I remember. No, of course. So for the harmful, which is not illegal content, we would, this would be, the category of content that would, violate of policy. So we would take action on it. But also, so I can't speak too much about online safety because I'm not really an expert of this law. But what I can say is that under DSA, this would fall under the risk assessment and risk mitigation measure about everything that would be harmful, even if it's not illegal content. Illegal content, we have to remove it based on law enforcement report. And also, as I was explaining in my intervention, we have specific reporting flow for this kind of content. Sorry.
Yeah. A lot of our community standards is content that is harmful but legal in some countries. And that's one of the reasons why we often our policies go beyond what the legal standard might be in one country or another. So that's absolutely something that we consider as part of our job, is to also catch content that is harmful and not just content that is illegal. It's worth mentioning that there are different ways to tackle that content, right? Some of that content should absolutely be removed and the actors should be removed from our services. But there are many other ways to tackle harmful content depending on the gravity, where it be with labels, interstitials, demotions, proactive education of our users, and so on and so forth. It's because we've been talking a lot about removals, but content moderation is not just about on or off platform. And the second question is on deplatforming. And that's something that we raise a lot because we also have a bit of a usual suspects problem, right, in these conversations where the big platforms are often there. On voluntary codes of conduct, it's also the case. But we've been calling other services to come and join these conversations as well. But we can't measure, of course, because we don't have access to their data, how much of our users have migrated there. But absolutely, it's a big ask from our side to bring these other smaller platforms to these conversations.
Yeah, no, we can't track where these users, uploaders might go after they've been blocked from YouTube. That may be something that an external agencies or NGOs could look at. It might be something that's quite useful for everybody, in fact.
Okay, thank you so much. I understand that these are a few challenging hours for you to answer all these questions, but I also hope that you see the frustration from many of my colleagues and understand where it's coming from. It's coming from years of trying to find a way to do a difference here with very little result. And when we call this hearing and invite you here and the companies here and they elect you to represent them, that's how we treat you, as the social media companies being here. So we respect and understand your answers, but we also will continue to push for more. And we have a few more minutes now for a short second round because we also want to do closing interventions and we need to end in 25 minutes because the room is occupied afterwards. So I'm just asking who would be interested in a second round? 1, 2, 3. Everyone. So what we're going to do is we're going to go from left to right. We're going to have a short question followed by a short answer, 1 minute, because otherwise we can't make it. Short question, short answer. Sarah, you go.
Thank you. Thank you. That's fine.
Alex.
This is a question for all of you, but I've got a stat that relates to Twitter. So anti-Semitic tweets have doubled since Elon Musk took over, according to the Institute for Strategic Dialogue. Research from the Anti-Semitism Trust from before he took over found out that there were 2 anti-Semitic tweets for every Jew in the UK. So that's 500,000 a year. So the question to all of you is, how can you argue there is free speech on your platforms when Jewish people are being crowded out by anti-Semitism on your platforms? It's to all of you.
Respectfully, I don't think that Jewish people are crowded out on YouTube. I hope that isn't the case. YouTube's an open platform, and we would, there are many videos explaining the Holocaust, giving educational and historical relevance to that and to anti-Semitism. So I don't think there is crowding out as such.
And that is 1 minute. So we continue. We don't have time. That's what I said. We have 1 minute each. Otherwise, no one will ask in the far end.
Your algorithms serve up more and more extreme and inappropriate content to people in order to keep them watching. They create bubbles where people only see content that relates to them. Can you let me know, yes or no would be fine, if you have got interventionist content that comes in, if you for example, on YouTube, when videos run on from each other, if people are going down a more and more extreme rabbit hole, do you have an intervention that happens in that and gives somebody content that is in a different direction or changes their minds or gives them some level of context, and for each of you if possible?
Briefly, if people search for content around the Holocaust, then we will surface panels and information, and we do have breaks that we put in place for under 18s around autoplay and bedtimes and the like.
And we're moving on to Orit. That we cannot do everyone. It's impossible. We don't have time.
My question relates to the AI revolution. I think that this technology and the usage of it can really create a change in your ability to enforce and actually quantify. I do not agree with you, Lara. I think that there is always a difficulty to quantify a problem, and I think it is doable completely. So are you considering using AI in a more advanced way to enforce your policy as a technological companies? The of course, against hate speech and anti-Semitism?
The short answer is yes. We've been leaning into AI in content moderation already, and we will continue to do so while also being cognizant of the risks, right? And making sure that the AI that we build is responsible and has the appropriate safeguards in place.
Anthony Housefather.
Yes or no, will you commit to a high-level meeting to follow up on our concerns in a private setting? Yes or no? And number two, will you commit to implementing the DSA worldwide since you have global policies? Lara?
We commit to continuing to engage with you. That's what I'm here for. So we can continue to have follow-up meetings, absolutely.
And DSA worldwide?
The DSA is a very, very long list of obligations on transparency as well as moderation. I'm sure some of them will be applied globally and others will be very country-specific. I'm not able to comment on all of DSA compliance 2 months before we have to be compliant.
Twitter?
So first answer, yes. Second answer, we will apply DSA globally for some product changes. Also, DSA has been voted by European. I don't think it's also fair that we apply to people that didn't adapt such laws. So I think for the product, yes. For the rest, no.
Yeah, DSA has very specific European obligations which we are heads down to deliver by August.
And my question will be, do you see the need for a common definition of anti-Semitism after this hearing, accepting the IRA definition, and can you commit to work towards getting your companies to implement that instead of having individual ones? Lara?
We absolutely see the value in the IRA definition, and that's why we continue to lean on it in our own community standards, absolutely.
Claire?
Yes, I think this is what we've been doing already after the first hearing, so we'll continue to do it.
Yes, our community guidelines broadly reflect it.
I'm sorry?
Our community guidelines broadly reflect the IRA definition.
But will you accept the IRA definition instead, trying to adopt that one?
Our community guidelines are already reflecting it.
Debbie?
Thank you. Lara, you referenced that you have 0.01 to 0.02% remaining hate content after your takedown policies. And the whistleblower, Frances Algan, she indicated when she testified in front of Congress that there was really only 3 to 5% hate speech captured. Those numbers, in terms of your prevalence rate remaining, with the hate content remaining, don't add up. And I'd like to know if Meta will commit to opening the window into how you arrive at your prevalence rate in terms of anti-Semitic content remaining online, because we need a better understanding of how you determine what prevalence is, and there's a wide discrepancy between what you state remains and what people with previous experience indicate.
I, of course, can't speak to the methodology used by people that are now outside the company on the numbers that they provide.
I'm talking about yours now.
On our number, on the prevalence number, there's a huge amount of resource on how it's calculated on our Transparency Center, but I'm absolutely open to having a follow-up discussion in detail with some of my colleagues on how that figure is reached, of course.
Okay, thank you.
Michal?
Thank you. I just wanted to, just because you said not crowded out, so I suggest just to try and look up Zio-Nazi on each of your platforms right now, like within a minute. What you will find is on all of your platforms when you look up Zio-Nazi, unless you don't take offense with that sort of term. And so if we can agree in terms of common sense that there has to be a clear definition, because what's happening actually is that we can and we will actually undertake to quantify the results that you haven't been able to quantify so that we can make them accessible to you, though it is your responsibility. So the question is, at the end of the day, is it sufficient, and I'm going to just quote the IRA, to stop leaning on the definition and stop broadly reflecting the definition and actually make accessible to those that are senior to you the imperative to use the definition if you're going to actually claim to be fighting anti-Semitism and identifying anti-Semitism? Is that anything you can relay back to your companies?
Very quick answer.
Yeah, yes or no. It's just asking you to relay the imperative we see for having a definition.
We have very clear definitions in our community guidelines.
Of anti-Semitism?
And I think we do reflect, and obviously we'll report back the conversations that we're having here.
You think you have a clear definition of anti-Semitism currently?
We think our policies broadly reflect the IRA definition.
Okay. Yeah, reflect. Okay.
Okay.
Just to know. Just to know.
I'll channel back your feedback, absolutely. But as I've said before, we value this definition and we use it in our standards.
So you think that this is the definition that's sufficient? Okay, sorry, I'm sorry.
Simcha, please.
Before you were asked, and you said, each and every one of you said, we're not commenting on specific wordings if we will take it down or not. But I'm not asking if you will take it down. I'm asking, in your training, if you are reflecting the IRA, can you say this is against the IRA definition, and we are telling our people to take down things that are against the IRA definition? Is this sentence true for your company, for your company, and for your company?
I think by asking your question, it's as if you would be asking a judge, can you tell me this person is going to be arrested?
No.
There is a study about the content. There is an analysis done by the Trust and Safety team. This is serious work. We can't just, I could be answering you yes or no, that would
But
be,
that's the idea of behind IRA
like
definition or training.
Working. And we are aligning also with the definition.
We train our content reviewers to understand what is against our policies.
What is IRA definition?
Including the aspects of the IRA definition that are reflected, of course.
Similar.
Okay.
Brad, please, you have the floor.
Thank you, and I'm going to follow up the other question, Mr. Housefeathers, but towards providing greater transparency, will each of you commit to not only meet with us and other stakeholder groups, but will you commit to sharing your data and be willing to consider additional steps to address and combat anti-Semitism? David?
We are absolutely committed to combating anti-Semitism, to taking more steps. We'll continue our dialogue with
That wasn't
the
my
likes of
question.
the
Will you meet with
ADL.
us? Will you share data? And will you consider from those conversations additional steps?
I'm very happy to meet with you again. And we're here. We're open to be questioned and in fora like this again. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, similarly, of course, the dialogue should continue. It's not just that we're open to it, we recognize we need to.
Yeah, not just here, but in other meetings. Claire?
The same, we are happy to meet, we are happy to take feedback on how we should improve. We know, that we still have work to do, so we know it has to be a continuous dialogue.
Thank you.
And finally, Alex.
Just one for Claire. So the Twitter's quite widely started to use readers added context they thought people might want to know. And I've seen this on lots of tweets where there's clearly anti-Semitic content. Is there a policy to utilize context rather than to utilize removal?
So yes, actually you may have seen, but we developed a tool which is called Community Notes, where on every tweet now people can add context. So it is a way for us to correct misinformation on the service, and also to educate people through more context on tweets. So I think, sometimes removal is a solution and it has to be done, but sometimes, adding more context and changing people's idea a little bit is also a win, we think, on the platform.
Okay, thank you so much. We're moving into the closing remarks. We all have 1 minute each, and I would invite you to go first if you want to say anything as a closing remark. One minute each.
1 minute.
David, Lara, and Claire.
Right. Well, listen, thank you very much for having us here, and we do appreciate the opportunity to engage in dialogue with you. We know that this is a challenge, it's a complex area. We are committed to it. There are increasing challenges that the community faces, and that is reflected on our platforms. We will stand up and be accountable. That is something that we are prepared to be, and we are prepared to be transparent. We need to make sure that in so doing that we are not creating opportunities for actors to abuse our systems. And we also need to be able to explain the nuance behind some of the challenges that we face. But we are prepared to invest and to take the problem of anti-Semitism very seriously, to ensure that this challenge is addressed and that our dialogue continues. I think, as the others have said, we don't have the answers, and we never will, all the time, but we work with you to ensure that we can do our best.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Lara?
Yeah, similarly, thank you for having us. Thank you for having us repeatedly, including when you're perhaps disappointed by a previous interaction, to continue that conversation. I think that's the way that we need to keep going forward. And as was mentioned earlier in the hearing, with an even wider group, with an even more diverse set of views over time. I'll reiterate that fighting hate speech overall on our platform is a priority. And indeed, it's not just about anti-Semitism, about any hate speech, any content that makes people feel uncomfortable or unable to use our services. That remains a priority that we work towards every day. We will never get it perfectly. We'll never get a 100% score, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't keep trying, and that's why we want to be held accountable. The one thing that I would like to close with is to encourage this group to continue the discussion on how well do the new frameworks that the EU is putting in place, how well are they working?
Thank you.
We
need to continue. Claire?
Well, thank you very much again. I think it's good that we have this debate. I think the frustration also shows that we still have progress to make, and we are very aware of that. I hope for the discussion to be able to continue, and also we know that, there are some problems, but we also want to be part of the solution, and we want to, work collectively with you. I'm hoping that there will be a possibility with the new DSA. I don't know if you will be trying to, for the task force to be reflecting in the Trusted Flagger program or part of this conversation, but we would be very happy to have this conversation with you and the European Coalition under this new law, which is going to be a game changer for our system, and this is something we very much welcome.
Thank you so much. And with that, we go to our parliamentarians' closing remarks. We're going to do that in reverse order of the questioning. So we'll start with Alex Sobel. 1 minute.
Thank you. I just want to say that we continue to have a gap between sort of the rhetoric from social media platforms and the reality. And actually, not all of you act the same. You're obviously not all here. There are other platforms, but even in your own responses, there's a different level of quality and I think of honesty in what you put forward. And I think very clearly, that we're going through legislative process, but I think that we need to have a legislative process right across jurisdictions, because it's clearly not working, the sort of self-censoring that's going on social media platforms in terms of anti-Semitism. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And with that, we go to Simcha Rothman.
Thank you. So, as I said before, I think the idea of global policy, especially when we're concerning issues of speech and regulation of speech, frightened me a little bit, much more than what we discovered today. I think that legislation in the UK, in Europe, in the US, in Canada, and all other countries that are part of this task force, and other countries, is a must, because the fact that even today, even after the hearing last time, even after the hearing today, I can not go online and report a post or a video or a tweet as anti-Semitic, and make sure that we will know the numbers, and we will know the dangers, and we will know how much you will be transparent of how much you took down, and how many responses human eye checked, and how much is AI. In this day and age, I cannot understand. I cannot understand how you're returning to your offices and knowing your platforms are not responsible to prevent anti-Semitism, and the responsibility should be with governments, not with you.
Thank you. With that, we turn to Kirsty Blackman.
This is a cross-party group. We have got wildly different policies. We've got wildly different politics, but we can come together on this and agree. We're not all religious. We're not all Jewish, you know, but we can come together and agree. We don't even all represent massive Jewish communities, but this is so important. We're all here because this is important. We're all here because anti-Semitism is international, as well as being national, as well as being local, as well as being personal. Belief in conspiracy theories is one of the biggest risks and concerns of our time. The place that those things happen is online, overwhelmingly. The internet is a wonderful place. There's so much positive, there's so much to be gained. But if people are being able to become radicalized, if they're being able to become more and more extreme and commit crimes as a result of that, then there's a problem that needs to be sorted. Jewish people, as well as trans people, are at the forefront of bearing the brunt of this. And if you guys can step up and ensure that your actions match your rhetoric, then that would be really appreciated.
Thank you so much. And with that, Orit.
I think that we all understand that today's street, city quarters, conferences, the most effective way of moving people into action is today's social media platform. And you know, just as we know, that with the power comes responsibility. I think that you should be much more proactive and transparent on that matter in order to protect the possibility and the reality in which there is a big misuse of your platform. And I personally think that a legislation should be put in place because your economic motivation actually, in a way, can be damaged if these incitements will be decreased and so on. And we should make sure that you will not have an economic incentive to encourage hate speech and anti-Semitism.
And with that, we turn to Sarah Jones.
Thank you. So, as I understand it, you don't have specific anti-Semitism policies. You won't share the data that you have. You can't show us how you train your moderators. You're slashing your trust and safety teams. Your algorithms are designed to enrage because reaction drives profits. I don't think you can say that you're delivering free speech. I don't think it's about free speech because you're creating what we see, and what we see is increased violence, increased anti-Semitism, increased far-right extremism, increased self-harm in our young people, and that is driving real-life violence in the real life. So I sadly can conclude that we have to use legislation and regulation because you're not going to do this on your own.
Thank you so much. Brad Schneider.
Thank you. Look, hate is tantamount to a virus, and anti-Semitism is perhaps the oldest of all hatreds. Like a virus, hatred evolves, and social media acts like a host, as I said before, spreading, amplifying, multiplying. We believe we need to staunch out the virus and work with you all to do so. We want to partner with you. But I think what you heard from this panel, what I think you should take back to your respective companies, is that we're resolved to defeat hate and defeat, specifically amongst ourselves, anti-Semitism. It's a threat to our communities, it's a threat to our children, it's a threat to our future. So we really need to work together. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Michal Kotlewunsch.
Thank you. Yeah, just to continue that, so it's really a case study of a toxic mutation, namely anti-Semitism, over thousands of years. And the use of dehumanization, delegitimization, and double standards, that's what enabled it to thrive and continues now to enable it to thrive and fester on your platforms. This is not about free speech versus censorship. It's actually about proactive responsibility and accountability for the equal protection and consistent responsibility that you all have to all peoples, to all forms of hate speech. In a digital reality, the IRA working definition is a critical working definition. It's a resource. That's what it was meant to be. It's not legally binding, as you must all know. And unless you use it comprehensively and not just this and that part of it and embrace it when it suits, then it is not helpful to you. We will continue to work together, following up with the DSA for transparency of algorithms, of policies, of implementation. And I want to say that this task force and many more members around the world that are committed alongside us, though they are not physically here today, are going to launch an external audit as a first critical step to realizing our own responsibility to predict, protect, and prevent the hate that is festering on your platforms. Thank you.
Thank you. Anthony has further.
Jews are all white supremacists who support apartheid. It is a statement, an absolute statement, saying that all members of one identifiable group have negative characteristics and is meant to inspire hate. It does not require context. What if I were to say Jews are all vermin that should be exterminated? Would you also say that requires context? Could it have artistic merit? I mean, I'm shocked. Because I asked the question last year. I thought at least this year, all three platforms would come prepared to answer that question. And what I do think is we're talking at loggerheads. I agree with what Sarah said about legislation, but I think we need to have dialogue. I think we need to have, between the leadership of this group and the leadership of each of these organizations, private discussions to see how we can try to bridge these very large gaps, I think, in where we're speaking, because I don't think we're talking across purposes now, and I think we need to have better discussions. Thank you.
Of course. Thank you. And with that, Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman-Schultz.
Thank you. The bottom line is that you must strengthen your commitment to detecting and removing anti-Semitism. Words matter, but actions speak louder. All of your companies have drastically reduced the size of your teams focused on internet trust and safety, as well as ethics, as the companies focus on cost cuts so you can satisfy your shareholders. As we all know from the saying, if it enrages, it engages. The unfortunate aspect of your business model is that it incentivizes enraging, polarizing language to increase clicks, while in tandem neglecting the necessary investments that prevent the spread of racist, anti-Semitic hate speech. ADL's recently released report in 2023 stated that 26% of Jewish respondents reported online harassment in the past 12 months, up from 21% in 2022. These are cuts that couldn't come at a worse time, and you should understand that we will continue to work together to hold purveyors of online hate accountable and work with social media companies to eliminate the ability of those who seek to use your platforms to spread anti-Semitic hate. And you should also know that we are not going away, and you should please understand that you cannot wait us out. So work with us. We encourage you to do that.
Thank you. So finally, I would also like, from my side, from the European Parliament, also thank you for coming. I want to thank you, my colleagues. I want to thank all the NGOs here, Jewish communities, everyone for coming and having this conversation. And we appreciate the dialogue, but we are, as you noticed, not extremely happy with the result. And we all know that when lawmakers are not happy with the result, sooner or later there will be a legislation. So hopefully we can reach further without a legislation, because we see this in other areas. We see this with CSAM, we see this with chat control. Everywhere we see that legislation will come if we don't see more results. And that's where we are right now. And just as my colleague said, there's a few of us here, but we're many and we're synchronized, and we're going to continue to push this on a global level together. So with that, I hope that my colleagues aren't too upset with me cutting them off all the time. And I hope that you won't block me from your platforms after doing this. So thank you so much, everyone, for coming to this dialogue. And next time we meet, I hope that we can discuss and commend you on results instead of asking the same questions. Thank you.